We'll be looking together this morning at Eph 5:22 through 6:4. I want to begin with this, though. Great Expectations is a novel by Charles Dickens. In it, we get to know Pip. Pip is a young orphan who dreams of getting rich. He dreams of becoming a gentleman and of marrying Estella, whom he met when he was 8 years old. And now Pip, as fiction would have it, receives an anonymous patronage and is catapulted into the gentleman's life that he dreamed. Could marriage to Estella be far behind? However, his great expectations don't work out so well. Estella marries his rival. Pip's sister and only living relative is beaten and eventually dies. Pip turns his back on his brother-in-law, who's been nothing but kind to him. And eventually Pip learns that his benefactor is a criminal, and he gives back the money. Life doesn't always live up to expectations. Maybe some of us feel that way about our families. For you parents, maybe it started with the girl with a sparkle in her eye, or the guy who was just so much nicer than all the others. You couldn't keep your mind off of him or her. Everything was going to be golden. It was going to smell like roses. But marriage and family take a lot of work. The gold has to be earned. The roses take fertilizer, which doesn't smell so good. And they have thorns, which can draw blood. For children, it's easy to look around and wish your family looked different. You wish your dad wasn't quite so square. My kids might have said something like that once upon a time. You wish you had more money. You wish your parents didn't work so much. You wish your parents could teach you to play sports. You wish your parents would quit trying to teach you to play sports. Things aren't always as we wish. And if they were exactly as we wish, we'd probably wish for something different anyway. But that doesn't mean we can't build something great. God gives us the building blocks to build something good. Pip, in Great Expectations, did some things to build a life. When he had money, he anonymously set up a friend and a position in a shipping company. When Pip lost his fortune, he actually went to that friend for a job and worked his way up in that same shipping company. With effort, he built something worthwhile. It wasn't the dream that he had when he was 8 years old, but it was a worthy life. And at the end, he even winds up with the girl. But that's fiction. The Bible, however, gives us guidelines that will help us build something great in our families. And that's for real life. Ephesians chapter 5. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. These verses hold us to an incredible standard. Some of you women are out there are going, sure. Submit to my husband? Have you met him? Some of you guys are saying, love my wife as Christ loved the church. Didn't he die for the church? That's a lot to ask. You want me to love my wife as much as I love myself? Children are to obey parents, but I can't exasperate or provoke my children. Do you know that little Johnny, he might be demon-possessed. And now you're telling me not only do I have to discipline my kids and provide for them, I need to instruct them in God's ways? I don't have time for that. How in the world can I get that all done? Do you know my life? Do you know how busy I am? Do you know the expectations that are on me? I've got a job. I'm trying to build authentic relationships with the people in my small group that Pastor Kevin keeps telling me I'm supposed to do this. I have my own life. How can I get this all done? I'm glad you asked that question. I want to share with you a principle that's going to change the game. It's going to change the way you live, the way that life is prioritized. We look at this passage, and in truth, I think I could preach 6 messages on this passage. I think if I look through the file cabinets, I could probably find 5 or 6 messages on this passage. I don't today want to get stuck with the submit and the respect as good and great as that stuff is. Today I want to be even more simple. God has called you to do more than be married. He's called you to do more than just provide a roof and food on the table. He's called you to build something great. He's called you to disciple your children. How do we do that? Time. Love is built, and time is the building block of love. You need time to build something with those building blocks of love. It's a question about priority. If I had only 6 months to live, what would I do? What would I focus on? If I realize that life is short and that we do only have a little time, how would I use that time wisely? The big question is your family placed in the right place? The Bible has some scriptures about managing our time. Teach us to number our days aright so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Or show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a mere hand's breadth. The span of my years is as nothing before you. Each man's life is but a breath. No matter how long we live, life is short. If we have something to do, we need to do it and not put it off for a better day. So let's play a little thought game here this morning. If you counted up all the time that you would have to spend at work to be successful, I mean truly successful, to blow the doors off, how many hours a week would it take? You'd never go home. If you sat down and allotted all the time your children need before they would say, okay, Dad, I've had enough. I feel completely full. My energy tank is full. You've played enough. You really need to go do some work, go to a meeting. How much time would it take? Or let's get recreational. If you sat down and figured out how long would it take you to become the most incredible golfer on the planet? Or you truly sat down and figured out how long it would take you to get every muscle toned just perfectly so you could look like that guy or the girl on the Peloton commercials. How much time would it take? You'd be at the gym all day. Or let's go social. Women, how long would it take for you to feel like you were completely nourished by your friends? That you were really connected, that you knew all the details of their life, and you could say, yeah, we're so close. Or guys, how long would it take you to know every detail of what's going on in the Vikings organization? Every player, every stat, every salary change, who got cut, who's been hurt. How many hours would it take? And when we look at these things, you say, I just can't get it all done. I can't seem to be the person that I am supposed to be mentally or socially or spiritually. I just can't get it all done. What I want to tell you is some of you think you have a scheduling problem. And maybe some of you do. But that's not the biggest problem. Some of you think you have a discipline problem. Maybe some of you do. But it's still not the biggest problem. Let me tell you what the major problem is. You will never have enough time to get it all done. That's the major problem. You will never get it all done. So, someone is going to be cheated. The big question is, who are you cheating? What are you cheating? Who would say they feel cheated? Sometimes we pray for our families and we say something like, God, I know I should be giving more time to my family, but would you please fill in the gap so that I can do what I have to do at work? I'm just going to ask you, Lord, pour out your grace at home. Help them understand. When we pray like that, when we just ask God to fill in what's going on in our families, we communicate that, yeah, you're important, but something's more important. It's kind of like this. Kind of a silly illustration, but okay, I can hold this. And I can hold this for quite a while. I'm not going to do it because, I'd probably still be holding it at the end of the service. But eventually, if I keep holding this and keep holding this and keep holding this and keep holding it, I'm not going to be able to hold it any longer. Not because I'm not strong enough, not because I'm weak, but because it's simply the process. Eventually, you have to change. My arm is not made to hold that forever. The muscles in my hand would get tired. Eventually, it would fall. When we put strain on our families by saying something else is more important over and over and over again, eventually, something crashes. That's why people end up saying things like, well, she just walked out and said, I don't want to be married anymore. I can't figure out what happened. My kid's grades just nosedived. It happened overnight. There's so much tension in our house. I don't know where it comes from. Your family's saying, I'm willing, but I am not strong enough to keep holding that up. And when it falls, everybody knows. Home is never the right place to cheat. Let's go a little deeper. Men, so often we cheat at home to have more time for work. In our marriage, one of the reasons we economize in our marriage is that there's no instant gratification or consequence. But if I compromise at work, there's an immediate consequence. At home, we don't tend to count. Nobody's scheduling a banquet for you if you make it to dinner on time. But at work, we can see the gratification. We make the extra sale. We get the extra money in the paycheck for the overtime. But don't take advantage of the loyalty of your family. To be loyal to something else that's not as important. Women, sometimes the temptation is to cheat your husband to focus on your children. Well, it's his fault because he comes home late anyway. Or maybe you're a working mom and the career is important to you, so you cheat your children or your spouse. But the greatest gift that you can give to your children is a healthy marriage. I don't know how many times my dad said, yeah, the greatest gift I can give you is to love your mom. If you have to cheat your children, because your marriage is going to provide that sense of security more than anything else. It's going to help them say no to poor choices. It's going to help them be that strong and secure person. Maybe you're a single person here today. You're saying, wow, those married people, they're all messed up. I can't believe they're so messed up they can't get their priorities straight. Yeah, that's fine and dandy until you have to put away the remote control or you have to put away the PlayStation because your wife or your child needs you. Even for me as a pastor, sometimes I need to cheat the job in order to be there for my family. Sometimes the emails need to wait, or the book won't get read, or the sermon could have used another illustration. So let's talk priorities. The first priority, of course, is to love God above all. Jesus gives us the most important commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. And of course, that's right. God must be first. Did you know that loving your family appropriately is a part of loving God? Loving your family appropriately is part of loving God. There's a verse that came right before our text. It says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The description of family relationships that we read is all an outworking of this verse. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The way we treat one another in our families, the way we treat our children, the way we treat our parents, it's a part of our obedience, our reverence for Christ. Our family relationships are a part of our spiritual life. Now, when it comes to human relationships and human responsibilities, your spouse comes first. Each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in this passage, a lot of teaching, but to boil it down to just one point, your spouse comes first. Following the example of Christ and his church. At Christ's first priority after obeying the Father, and part of obeying the Father was the church, was to give himself for the church. Here's an example of what a husband should follow: God first and then his wife. In the same way, the principle is that the woman's husband is second only to God in her priorities. And that greatest gift you can give your children is a healthy marriage. Your marriage will create that personal security for them more than anything else in their lives. Seeing their mom and dad not only places a safety net in their hearts, that their world is secure, but it helps them understand what marriage can look like someday when it's their turn. That security and that safety net, that model of marriage is all so important. Your spouse comes first, and your children come second. This is still part of that idea of submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Paul turns to the parent-child relationship, and of course, yes, children must submit to their parents. Honor your parents, obey your parents. That's a commandment. But what does it look like for mutual submission on behalf of parents? How do we submit to our children out of reverence for Christ? That is giving them what they stand in need of. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. If husbands and wives are second only to God in our priorities, it stands to reason that the result of the marriage relationship, the children, should be the next priority. And I want you to notice that Paul doesn't just say we're supposed to provide a roof for our kids and give them food to eat. He says we are to teach them God's ways. Train up a child in the way he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart. Our families of origin are important. Our extended families are important. But these should never trump our spouse and our children. You will never, ever, ever have time for everything. You can never be the best employee, the best auxiliary member, the best volunteer, in the best physical shape, and have the best fantasy football team all at the same time. And build something great at home. Something has to give. Something will be cheated. So put off the email until tomorrow. Leave your job on time. Say no to the friend you just spent time with last weekend. Drop one of the fantasy football leagues. And use your time to build the love relationships in your family. Who or what are you cheating? Do your priorities match God's priorities for you? Would you pray with me?